Shalom lekulam, and welcome to this lesson, lesson number 8 on the distinction between a nes, miracle, and kishuv, sorcery or magic. In this specific lesson, we're going to be talking about dream interpretation and omens and sign. So we're going to go to some of the sources that talk about these differences between these two types of, if you want to call it, looking for signs in life in order to find clarity in the things that are happening or will happen. And you have to keep that word, that keyword in your mind all the time. These are signs. We're looking for signs, symbols. And what we're going to see in this lesson is that there are two ways to look for signs and symbols. However, one is rooted in what is called the forces that are basically in a lower realm than the ones that we really want to tap into, which is the open realm. However, we're going to see that even with dreams, which we're going to have a probably 2 parts lesson on dreams only, we're going to see that dreams, even though they are giving us symbols and signs and things like that, they're limited, and also they can be deceiving. So we're going to see that if we study, the concept of dreams within the Kabbalistic ideas and Kabbalistic teachings. So let's start with a little bit of introduction on dreams and also omens, so we can have an idea also of what we're going to be talking in this lesson. So in Hebrew, in the Hebrew Bible, we're going to see explicitly that the practice of looking for signs or omens is basically forbidden. It's called omens, called ניחוש in Hebrew. They're associated with the practices of idolatry, and this idolatry was specifically, when you read the Bible, the idolatry they're talking about is about the idolatry that or practices that have to do with the surrounding nations, the nations that surrounded Israel. So God commanded the Israelites basically not to do the same things as the surrounding nations. The prohibition of divination is going to be found on the text in the Torah that this series of lesson is based on, and is Deuteronomy 18 verses 10 and 12, in which in there it says, there shall not be found among you anyone who interprets omens, practices sorcery. And this is a negative commandment, a mitzvah in Jewish law. And later we're gonna be reading from Sitra Achra, in which we're gonna see more explanation of that specific negative commandment. Now, Maimonides' opinion was the following: that the influential that this influential medieval sage found that this prohibition is very important. He actually, strongly reinforced this prohibition. He stated that relying on omens is foolish and it's a form of idolatry, which doesn't go away from what the Torah was already telling us, right? And he listed examples such as a person saying, "Since I saw a snake on my right, I will not leave my house today." And he saw that as violations of this commandment, right? Just because an animal is basically walking normally in an area that you were supposed to, and you have these concepts of right, left, right, good, left, bad, and something happened, that this animal crosses, your right path, that means, that these animals bring in bad luck for that day, you will not do something like that. He found that kind of like foolish and not to do. In the Talmudic literature, we're going to find that despite the strong prohibitions, the Talmud contains discussions on events that were considered potential signs, acknowledging a popular belief on certain good omens. Examples of this, finding a particular biblical passage coming to mind in the morning was seen as a sort of minor prophecy. Eating certain foods with names that sound like blessings in the eve of Rosh Hashanah, which is a Jewish New Year, is an example of using wordplay for a good omen or sign or good fortune, like carrots, whose Aramaic name sounds like multiply. Okay. Now, also the Talmud talks about that there's a concept called Masal Israel, which is no constellations or no constellation for Israel, which is a significant rabbinic opinion that holds that astrology and omens have no validity or doesn't apply to Israel, maybe for other nations, but not Israel. So the people of Israel who follow God's commandments are not subject to these celestial or random influences, and they can transcend their power. If there was any power, which we're gonna see there's some kind of power, but it's not a power that leads to the truth, it leads to the right path, and you're gonna see why. Now, superstition versus heedfulness, a famous piece of advice from the medieval text Sefer Hasidim, the book of the pious, tell us that one should not believe in superstitions, but still it is best to be heedful of them. This reflects a tension between official doctrines and popular customs, where some practices persist out of tradition rather than a strong belief in their power. So that's why you're going to see, as I mentioned in other lessons, that some Jews believe that it's better to put your pants using your right leg first, and your shoes the same way. Put your right foot shoes first, and this is based on superstitions on always starting with the right foot, always starting with the right way, and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you forget one day and you put your left shoe first, you're gonna have a bad day. Not necessarily. And after all, everything's in your mind. What you put in your mind is gonna happen, right? So if you say you're gonna have a bad day, you're already predisposed mentally. You're reprogramming your brain to have a bad day. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the left foot shoe that made your day bad. It was you program yourself by thinking that you're gonna have a bad day. Anyway, Kabbalistic sources often delve deeper into the spiritual significance of these phenomena, but they largely maintain rabbinic stance against forbidden forms of divination. So you're gonna find that even though Kabbalah sometimes says, it's not really, you're gonna find a lot of contradictions, of course, depending on the rabbinic school and also the Kabbalistic school. I come from a Kabbalistic school in which you can use amulet, you can use the red string, but you have to understand that these things don't have any power other than reminding you. The whole power lies in your mind. These things are supposed to be there to remind you, like a sign, right? You have the red string. The red string is not going to protect you from the evil eye. It's going to help you not to have the evil eye, so you don't attract that kind of forces towards you. An amulet to protect you from, let's say, from harm and things like that. It's not the amulet that is going to do the work. It's what you actually the symbolism of that amulet in your mind, in your subconscious mind as well, is where we remind you to constantly remember that you are protected by forces that have nothing to do with the amulet, but the amulet represents those forces. So you're gonna see these angelic names in there and that kind of stuff, and they're just telling you that this amulet is supposed to help you connect to those forces, but not the amulet. The amulet's not the thing that is connected to these forces, and thus this thing give you the protection. That's not the way it works. Is that this thing that was created is supposed to be created with a lot of respect, of course, because there's names in there of God and names of angels. This thing is going to help you connect to these forces. How? By looking at it or by reminding yourself that you have it in your pocket or somewhere. And in this way, you are protecting yourself by connecting yourself with these forces, with these angelic forces. So let's talk about these rabbinic stances against forbidden forms and divination, like the symbolic meaning, right? It's a lot of symbols. And basically that's what human beings are looking for, symbols and patterns. The focus in Kabbalah is less on predicting the future through external signs and more on the internal spiritual reality of the symbolic nature of the universe. So we will be studying in Kabbalah only about the system, how the system works, the laws of the system, and when you understand these laws of the system, you don't have to rely on symbols or anything like that. You know that this will lead to that. There's a root and a consequence. And that consequence becomes the root of other consequences, right? So it's a ripple effect, if you want to call it that way. In practical Kabbalah, some branches of practical Kabbalah, Kabbalah Ma'asit, engage in the use of amulets, as I mentioned, like the Hamsa and the red string, to ward off the evil eye or negative spiritual forces. Also, there's something called, the demonology and the supernatural, which you're going to find it in Kabbalah as well, in which you're going to see mystical texts often mention a rich demonology and angelology, which foster some beliefs in specific protective measures, such as covering mirrors during mourning to avoid seeing demons or placing salt in corners of the room. However, these are often considered folk customs or old wives' tales, and the line between authentic religious expression and superstition can be debated. Um, we can talk about salt all day, but it's the nature of the salt. They say that salt repels demons and bad spirits, and that's the reason they do it. For example, I remember going during Shabbat to a house in which they practice, after they put salt on the bread, they practice throwing the salt over their shoulders as a sign of basically cleaning themselves, also bringing good luck and things like that. There are different traditions there, family traditions, Sephardic, Ashkenaz, you name it. Overall, Judaism officially encourages rational trust in God and adherence to His commandments, while recognizing a widespread of historical and cultural presence of folk beliefs and a cautious acknowledgement of science within specific contexts. So you're going to see that even though in Judaism we don't practice astrology as many people will see it, we're going to see this in a future lesson. We use astrology to measure times and to know when some gates of lights are open in what we call in time, right? These are different gates that we can enter into the temple of creation, and we need to take advantage of those. But to predict the future, not really. We can see that in the future something is not propense to be a positive time, but that does not mean that something wrong is going to happen. It just means that you need to change the way you approach anything during that time, but doesn't force or points of anything. Now, the primary sources that address dreams and omens include the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, the Talmud, and later mystical texts like the Zohar and some works of Kabbalah. And in the Bible, what we're going to see, or the Tanakh, we're going to see that dreams are frequently a direct means for God to communicate with prophets and other significant figures such as Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Daniel, and King Solomon. One of the most famous dreams out there, or two dreams out there that are very famous, are the dreams of Jacob, Jacob's ladder, in which he saw the angels coming up and down, right? And Joseph, when he interpreted the dream of the Pharaoh. Prophetic communications can be also be given through dreams. God tells Miriam and Aharon, when prophets of the Lord arise among you, I make myself known to them in a vision. I speak with them in dreams. This is in Numbers chapter 12, verse 6. Also, you're going to see that the Tanakh also talk about the interpretation of these dreams. Biblical dreams often require interpretations, as seen in the stories of Joseph and Daniel. These figures attributed their ability to interpret dreams to divine inspiration, not an occult science. But also, you're going to find that there's skepticism about dreams. For example, some biblical texts express caution or outright condemnation of relying on dreams for general guidance or practicing divination. You're going to see that in Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 25 to 32, and in Zechariah chapter 10, verse 2. Now, rabbinical literature like the Talmud, particularly in Tractate Berachot from chapters 58a, 55a to 57b, provides an extensive discussion of a wide range of rabbinical opinions on dreams and their meanings. And I tell you, there's a lot of information there. You can spend basically 2 to 3 to 4 hours just reading and seeing the different opinions about dreams and what the dream means and all that. And there's a lot of information there about dreams. But one of the things that it is gonna, like catch your attention is that it says that a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. And this is the common rabbinic saying, is that that's a minimum, basically, a dream has of prophecy in it, which indicates that dreams retain a hint of the divine, but are not full or direct prophecy. The statement is one where it says, a dream is 1/60th of prophecy, right? Comes from Talmud Berachot 57b. The meaning is both quantitative, it's a metaphoric saying, and it's also qualitative. It's a description of a spiritual origin, right? And when we do the lesson on dreams, we're gonna go deeper into this 1/60th of prophecy, and we're gonna see more in depth, what it actually means. But in the Talmud, what we're gonna see is that the Talmud says that a dream is 1/60th of prophecy, right? The sages, they use 1/60th as a standard metaphor for something that contains a faint trace of another realm, but not its full essence. If we go by the number 60, we can see that it has to do probably with Seramping, right? 6 Sefirot, Chesed, Geburat, Tifaret. You're gonna have Nesat, Hod, and Yesod, and there's 2 Sephiras in there that have to do with dreams, and it's Hod and Nesach. And you have 6 Sefirot in Seramping, so 1/60th of prophecy, that means it belongs to one of those Sefirot, and that's for future references when we study the dreams. We're going to see which one is it. We're going to mention here probably as well. So, for example, in the Talmud, in that specific verse, Berachot 57b, it says that, let me see if I can find it here quickly. But it says that fire is considered 1/60th of the Gehenna, right? With Gehinnom, and honey is considered 1/60th of manna. And then it says, Shabbat, or the Shabbat sleep specifically. Let's see if it's here. Okay, it says this following. I found it. It's 5 things are 1/60th of something else, and these are the following: fire, honey, the Shabbat, sleeping, and dreaming. Fire is 1/60th of Gehenna. Honey is 1/60th of manna. The Shabbat is 1/60th of the world to come. Sleep is 1/60th of death. And dreaming is 1/60th of prophecy. And then it mentions, 6 things are good omens for a sick person. And these are the following: sneezing, sweating, good bowel movements, seminal emissions, sleeping, and dreaming. And when you see these are good omens in ancient languages, right? They might have, like the word symptoms, right? So it's good symptoms or good signs, right? Omens, in this case, translated as omen. So 1/60 presents a connection but not an identity. It's a trait, it's a nitzot, a little spark, but not the full revelation of that light, right? It's a spiritual delusion ratio. Rashba, in response to chapter 1, and Maharsha explain it is just enough to hint, but not enough to rely on. Basically, you can dream a dream and have, this dream, but that you cannot rely on the dream. And we're going to see why when we study dream in depth. It has to do with who does the interpretation, and also how vivid and how symbolic the dream is, or if it is a dream that is repeating itself, or if it is a dream that continues from another dream that you have in another day, things like that. So Rashi, in talking about Berachot 57b, tells us that a dream has a spark of truth, right? But it's also mixed with nonsense. The Maharav of Prague, in Chidushei Agadot, talking about Berachot 57 as well, says prophecy is a direct revelation, while dreams are indirect reflections of higher worlds. So dreams are a diminished symbolic echo of prophetic communication. Now the Ramban, when he talks about Genesis chapter 46 verse 2, he says that dreams can be a medium for divine instruction, but the soul must be at a receptive state. Now the Kabbalistic explanation, like the Zohar, tells us that during sleep the Neshama and Ruach ascend, and we're going to touch base on this in the future again in this lesson, encountering the upper world, and sometimes receive coded messages through Malachim, angels. And these angels are 2 angels specific, Gabriel and Michael. Because this revelation is filtered through imagination and subconscious, it comes out distorted like reflected light. Rabbi Chaim Vital, in Sharei Kedusha, he mentions 3 spiritual sources of dream: holy prophetic sparks from Neshama or angels. Another source would be the impure forces, a kelipot. and psychological residue of the day. I'm gonna see the food that you eat, the things that you're thinking also can give you different dreams. Only the first category of this, which is the holy prophetic spark that he was talking about, is what is considered 1/60th of prophecy. So I wasn't gonna touch base on this, but I'm gonna do it quickly. What exactly is the fraction of 1/60th? In the future, we're gonna see, when we have this lesson on dreams only, that it has to do with one of the sephirah, one sephirah in specific, among 6 sephirot. Each sephirot has 10 sephirot within themselves, so it's a ramping is basically comprised of 60 sephirot. And one sephirot specific has to do with dreams. Now, 1/60th is a threshold where nullification or bitul occurs, like bitul beshishim in kashrut. The nullification of a sixth, right? When you do the kashrut, the lower element contains a trace of fire, but not enough to dominate identity. So dreams contain enough prophetic light to matter, but not enough to rely on prophecy. Okay, so as we have seen, the source of direct divine revelation in a dream is going to be clear, absolute, fully awake, purified, and the status is halachic authority accepted, and that's for prophecy. Now, for dream, the difference between dream and prophecy is that indirect symbolic it has an indirect symbolic influence. It's mixed. When it's mixed with our own imagination and things that we have done, or things, or when we eat something, the mind start working differently because the body's working overtime to digest the food. It's mixed and symbolic. The reliability, how reliable it is partial and fragmented. The consciousness that we use in there is the subconscious imagery, and the status requires interpretation. And that's something we're going to touch base in our lesson on dreams, that who interprets the dreams also influences if the dream is going to come true or how it's going to become true. So interpretation is key, right? When it comes to dreams. A famous saying states that a dream not interpreted is like a letter not read, suggesting that interpretation is a powerful act that can even influence the dream's outcome. The first interpretation is considered particularly significant. Also, for dreams, we have a mixture of sense and nonsense. So the rabbis taught that just as there is no wheat without straw, there is no dream without some idle vain matter mixed with the truth. Also, you're going to see that there are some practical responses to dream, and the Talmud will give us certain rituals for addressing disturbing dreams, and this includes the Hatavat Halom dream amelioration, which is a ceremony performed before 3 people to symbolically transform a bad dream into a good one by reciting specific biblical verses, or using these verses to transform the dream into a good one, or to look for redemption or peace. But also by fasting and charity, which is the one that is, in my opinion, the one that is preferable when it comes to Kabbalah. Fasting the day after a particularly distressing dream, even on Shabbat in some extreme cases, was considered effective and in annulling bad omens. In modern times, giving charity and studying Torah might do this instead. So now let's look at omens, right? And then we're gonna go back to dreams. So omens are basically ways for us to look for signs and reading reality. The definition of omens is the following. It's called menachesh in Hebrew. It's the attempt to derive knowledge of the future or guide actions based on arbitrary external signs, such as, since my breath fell from my mouth, I must not travel today, or another one, because a deer crossed my path, my business will succeed. And these things, you find them in the Talmud as examples, what people used to believe or may still believe. This is considered a form of forbidden divination, and the sources of why this is considered forbidden divinations is, again, Deuteronomy 18. We're going to find it also in Mishnah, Sanhedrin 7:11, in which it lists menachesh among some of the capital offenses. Also, you're going to find in Talmud Sanhedrin 65b, in which gives examples of menachesh behavior, which is linked to Sanhedrin 7 in the Mishnah. And Ramban in Hilkot Avodah Zarah defines what menachesh are and forbids the menachesh because it is a negative commandment, right, that is given to us. Now, we have also the Sefer HaChinuch, in which it's explained to us, why this commandment is important for us to follow. So I'm going to read from Sefer HaChinuch. This one specific is from volume 3, and he's talking here about the prohibition against practicing augury or omen. This is commandment 249, and it says the prohibition against practicing augury or omens, that we should not heed omens, for it is stated, you shall not practice augury. This is in Leviticus 19:26, and this was repeated elsewhere, as it is stated, there shall not be found among you one that uses augury. This is based on Deuteronomy 18. It was taught in the Midrash Sifrei, one that uses augury. For instance, if a person says, my breath fell from my mouth, a stick fell from my hand, a snake passed at my right, and a fox at my left, and he will not hold back on account of these from carrying out some action. In the Midrash Sifra, it was taught that you shall not practice augury, like, for example, those who practice foretokening with a mole or a fowl or by the stars or similar things. Thus far, the Midrash, so too there is, for example, what the foolish masses of people say, since I have turned back from my way that I was taking, or a deer crossed it, or a shrinking cow is passing over my head, or since I saw that certain things at the beginning of the day, I will make no profit today, or some evil occurrence will befall him. All these activities and their like are included under the injunction of not practicing omens, right? Not seeking omens. At the root of the precept lies the reason that these things are matters of utter lunacy or folly, and for the truly holy people that God chose, it is not fitting that they should pay regard to lying words. Moreover, they are a factor that thrusts a man away from faith in the eternal Lord and from his sacred Torah, to set him going from their midst to completely heresy. For he will reckon that all his good and bad fortune, all that happens to him, is a matter of chance occurrence, not by watchful care on the part of his Creator. In consequence, he will thus abandon all the principles of religion. Therefore, since the eternal Lord desires our good, he commanded us to remove this thought from our heart, to set firmly in our heart that all evil and good issue from the word of the one on high according to a man's deed, but they be they good or bad. And omens neither help nor hinder, as it is written, for there is no augury with Jacob, nor divination within Israel. This is from Numbers 23. The details of the precept are in chapter 7 of the Talmud tractate Shabbat, and in the Tosefta of the tractate. It applies everywhere and every time for both man and woman. If a person violates it and does any action according to omens, with witnesses present who give him due warning, he's given whiplashes. But this specifically through a bed thing, so, 3 judges. And so in every instance that we have written previously. And when we write that whiplashes are given, the meaning is in the Holy Land, and that is the place for the trial for 23. And when it says 23, it talks about justices. For capital cases are not tried in other countries except for an informer alone, because his death means rescue and survival for others who are better than he is. So this is what Sitra Achra actually tells us about it. And I know it talks about whiplashes and things like that. If you go to the Mishnah, it even talks about the 4 different deaths and all that. And we can actually, when it comes to concepts and things like that, talk about those 4 different kinds of death, which is death by fire, death by basically by you kill a person using the noose, and stoning and lashes and all that. It's all have different symbols. It does not only talks about something that happened or probably never happened, right? Because the Talmud doesn't tell us, anybody was actually killed in such a way in ancient times, but it tells us that this is the kind of penalty that a person might get, right? And but these are symbolic penalties, and there's a reason why there's only 4. It has to do with the 4 worlds and the 4 type of evil inclinations that we have and how they should be taken care of symbolically by using prayer. Okay, now so we see that Menachesh basically attempts to manipulate or read reality through external coincidences, right? Assuming a causal mystical link to these things that happen. Now, Kabbalah teaches that it is spiritually unhealthy to practice Menachesh because it draws influence from the Sitra Achra, which is the other side. It causes dependence on impure or chaotic forces, not holy forces or holy channels. The Tzchaim in Shar HaKedusha tells us that the impure realm transmits information, but only through distortion. Reliance in such this channel strengthens the impure realm. The Zohar also gives us a warning saying that engaging in omen places a person under forces of Tumah. The energetic level of these type of practices always going to come from the Sitra Achra, from the kelipot, the shells, and influences or gives strength to this ruach tumah, which is the spirit of uncleanness. So let's make sure, that when we practice this is not something that it's in our practices as we study Kabbalah, because you're going to find books of Kabbalah that talk about these things, about dream interpretation and all that. And that's okay, but we have to make sure that we understand, what's happening behind it, what kind of forces I'm dealing with. And omens and that kind of stuff, it's sometimes nonsense. For example, there's belief that if there's a solar eclipse, that you're not supposed to be under the solar eclipse or anything like that, because it brings bad, it's a bad omen. Same thing with the moon when the moon is being eclipsed. And in reality, it has nothing to do. These are just uh, the forces of physics, which is part of also the system working. Anything physical in the physical realm can affect the spiritual. Everything that is happening in the physical has its roots in the spiritual. So these things, the moon passing in front of the earth and creating, the lunar eclipse, or the earth passing in front of the moon, creating a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse, right? So you got the moon passing in front of the earth, that's a solar eclipse. And the earth passing in front of the moon, that's a lunar eclipse. Those things are natural things. Back then, because there were no explanation for people of these forces of physics in the universe and all that, and how the earth, moon, and the sun are different entities. They're basically the earth is going around the sun instead of the sun going around the earth, and things like that. The earth is not flat. Now we have better understandings of these things. We know that these things mean no harm to us. We know that also there's certain electromagnetic field disturbances or changes, but other than that, we're not supposed to believe that these things are gonna bring bad luck. Sometimes these things actually are ideal for us to start measuring times, right? Because this happens certain times in our lifetime, or in our what we call time as humans living on Earth, right? Because our time is limited on this planet. So we should be seen as when the clock mark 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., that's the first one, the second one, the third one, how much time we have, it's our patterns. They repeat themselves every so often. So we should not see them as ניחוש, and I shall not do anything after this because this lunar eclipse is going to bring, a lot of bad luck. No, the lunar eclipse is marking a time. What you need to know is what time is it. It's not that the lunar eclipse is causing something bad. The lunar eclipse is just telling you it's time for something, but it's not causing that something, okay? So ניחוש in English is most accurately translated as divination by omens, or superstitious omen-seeking. More nuanced English equivalents include augury, omen divination, fortune telling by signs, superstitious interpretation of random events, reading signs to predict or influence outcomes. Now, the word that we're using, which is menachesh, simply means one who practices divination by omens. Omen diviner, omen reader, an augur, right? So just in case you see that we're using ניחוש and menachesh, basically we're talking about the same. Now, in Hebrew, menachesh is one who interprets signs or coincidences or fate or prophecy. ניחוש, omen-based divination, superstition, and lenachesh, basically to divine through omens. So if you see this word, it have to do with omens. So menachesh attempt to manipulate or read reality through external coincidences, as we mentioned, and their energetic level is going to be from the Sitra Achra, kelipot, and influence the ruach tuma, as we mentioned. Now, dream interpretation is the effort to understand the spiritual meaning behind dreams. Dreams may contain, as we mentioned, some truth, 1/60th, but that does not mean, that the dream is 100% trust. You cannot trust 100%. So you're gonna see, like we mentioned in Barachot 58-57 of the Talmud, where dreams contain truth and the interpretation of these dreams matter. In Zohar, it talks about the dreams are spiritual messages. Specifically, the Zohar, let me go back. Specifically, the Zohar talks about okay. The Zohar talks about angelic messages in the dream. You can receive angelic messages in a dream, and these dreams are going to come from Gabriel or Michael. And when dreams are not 100%, they require a lot of interpretation. They say they come from Gabriel. When they're very vivid and they're just, that there's no need for interpretation because it's, almost like if you lived that dream, say, coming from Michael. And we're going to see that when we study dreams, And Ramban said that dreams may be prophetic. Rambam, and Yesodei Torah says prophecy sometimes begins in dreams. So let's keep that in mind. So what happens during when a person is dreaming? During sleep, the nefesh remains in the body. This is the animal force, right, in a body. The ruach rises to Yetzirah and can encounter angels, because that's the realm of the angels. Sometimes the neshama ascends higher, which is rare, and that's when a person can receive not only a dream but a prophecy through that dream, if that kind of ascension happened. The Zohar, as we mentioned, said dreams may be truthful because the soul interacts with spiritual realm because of this ascension. Sha'arei Kedusha tell us that dreams originate from mixed sources, holy and unholy, must be interpreted through Torah wisdom. What we're gonna see is when we study dreams in depth, is that depending what you eat or what you're thinking during the day, also that influences the dream. The energetic level of a dream can be holy. And what I say is it can be holy is because also it can not be holy. So sources are holy, like malachim, the angels, the kelipot, and this is where demonic forces also influences the things that we dream. Human psychological residue, what you were thinking during the day, your stress level, the food that you're eating, right? The interpreter must distinguish sources. Interpretation itself may shape realization. So if you say that dreaming of a snake biting you is bad, then you're saying it's going to be bad. But in traditional interpretation of a snake biting you means, good luck. Berachot 55b says all dreams follow the mouth of the interpretation. That's why we need to be careful on how we interpret these dreams. So the differences between omens and dream interpretation is that in halacha, omens are forbidden, dreams are permitted, but with caution. The sources of the omens are going to be the Sitra Achra and the kelipot. Dream interpretation from the soul, angels, or psyche. Directionality. Okay. External signs, right? It relies on what is outside, and this relies on the internal ascent of the soul, right? The soul needs to ascend in order to get this information. The mechanism is coincidental events for omens and symbolic revelation for dream interpretation. The spiritual risk, high impurity when it comes to omens, and it's mixed, but it can be holy when it comes to dreams. The Kabbalistic domain for omens is the kelipot, while the Kabbalistic domain for dreams is going to be the world of Yetzirah and the world of Biriah. The validity, according to Kabbalah, omens are invalid. Don't trust them. They mean nothing. But dreams, Kabbalah also going to tell you, sometimes true, sometimes. The method, passive reading of random events, while dreams interpretation is skill symbolic decoding. So you need to know the system, right, and the symbols. The Zohar position, or what the Zohar says about this omens and dreams. Zohar rejects omens. When it comes to dream interpretation, accepts but filters, telling you that sometimes these dreams are subject to our own emotional states or other forces. The goal of omens is to control, to control the illusion of control. Let's put it that way. While dream interpretation is understanding what is going on in our lives. Why one is forbidden and the other one is permitted? When Menachesh, omens, is a passive read of random external events, strengthen the Sitra Achra, which we don't want to do, right? Attempts to manipulate reality without divine channels, and does not involve ascent of the soul. Thus, the Torah prohibited, and when it comes to dream interpretation, is rooted in a soul ascent during sleep, often involves spiritual messaging, can involve some Ruach HaKodesh. It was used by biblical figures such as Joseph and Daniel, not inherently prohibited but must be handled carefully. Berachok 55b, we're going to say this again, dream is 1/60th of prophecy, therefore permitted if done within halachic and holy framework. So let's talk about some events listed in Sifrei of Deuteronomy and other Talmudic sources as examples of omens that one should not rely upon, as doing so violates the Torah prohibition. This is to give you an example of what you might find if you start doing your own research when it comes to omens and dreams. Irons falling, if a person's breath falls from the mouth, or their staff falls from their hand, and they interpret this as a sign of misfortune that causes them to change their plans. Remember my grandmother from my mother's side, she used to say, whenever the broom falls on the floor, that we were going to have visitors and things like that. She believed that. Or if a fork or a spoon fall on the floor, that we were going to have also visitors and all that. Animal Crossing, a snake creeping on the right and a fox running on the left and blocking the road were considered bad omens. Just like today we talk about black cat, or walking under a ladder and all that, that's also bad luck. Animal behavior, divining omens from the moment a bird or weasel, or from a hen crawling like a rooster, which some believe was a bad sign requiring the hen to be slaughtered. Now, let's take a moment on this quickly, because sometimes when animal behavior changes, it's not a bad omen. It's a sign, right, that something is going to happen, and this it's something that people in the past and some people still to this day know, that when certain animals behave certain ways because earthquake is going to happen, and it does, or when animals run to the mountains, it's because an earthquake is going to happen and following probably a tsunami. And we saw examples of that in the early 2000s with a tsunami that happened in the Pacific, in which they say, a lot of animals saved themselves because they knew something was going to happen. And humans, because we're so disconnected to nature, we don't perceive that imbalance in the force, if you want to call it, right? But animals do that. So not necessarily the animal behavior is a bad omen or anything like that. Sometimes, the behavior of the animal is like the animal is basically feeling something, perceiving something, and we need to pay attention. So this specifically, look at it, animal behavior from the scientific point of view, and do your research, and you're gonna see, a lot of these things. There's some truth in it, not in a mystical way, but in a scientific way. Eclipses and solar and lunar eclipses are discussed extensively in the Talmud, specifically in Sukkah 29a, and are universally described as bad omen for the entire world. A solar eclipse was compared to a king who removed a lantern from his servants, leaving them in darkness, signifying divine displeasure. Different colors during an eclipse indicated the nature of the coming calamity. Red like blood meant war, black like sackcloth meant hunger. Despite this, later rabbinic and modern views emphasize that these are natural, predictable phenomena that should not be feared, but rather seen as times that call for heightened prayer and good deeds. We talked about that already. Make sure you understand that. Because some people still to this day talk about eclipses as something bad. It might be something positive in there as well. And that positive comes from you elevating yourself spiritually and start doing good deeds. Household events. If a corpse removed vessels from a house in a dream, it was considered a bad omen, suggesting that someone else in the house might soon die. Sickness and recovery. Certain food or actions could cause a sick person to relapse, which some view as a sign of ill fortune. For example, eating specific meats, shaving, or bathing after recovery. And sickness and recovery, look at also from the scientific point of view. You'll see there's no mystical issues there. In general principle, the Jewish law, halacha, the way, right, is that relying on this random sign is a violation of the Torah command against ניחוש, divination, or interpretation. The sages taught that one should not trust this omen, but trust in God's providence. While acknowledging that these beliefs were prevalent in ancient world, the ideal Kabbalistic perspective is to believe that the people of Israel, through their adherence to the Torah and good deeds, are above the influence of such type of omens or fate. And this is based on Ein Masal Israel. There is no constellation for Israel. We can transcend these things. Now, before we finish, let's read a little bit from the Zohar, so we can see, what the Zohar says about dreams. And we're not going to discuss it because we're basically out of time. But this is something we're going to be talking when we start these lessons on dreams only, so we can understand dreams in a better way. Because it's something that happened to everybody. Everybody dreams. Everybody's looking for signs and symbols in dreams. Like, for example, some people look for numbers of lottery numbers in dreams in order to play the lottery and all that. So it's very important to know what is good, what is bad when it comes to dreams, what is permissible, what is not. So this is from Zohar Vayetzeh, verse 45. He asked, "What is the difference between a prophecy and a dream? A prophecy is part of the world of the male, and a dream is part of the world of the female." So it's telling you here that the difference between the two forces that are inherent in here, right? So prophecies from male means given, and a dream is part of the female, which means receiving, right? The nukhba of Serampin, right? The nukhba of Serampin. So prophecy is Serampin, and then dreams is the nukhba, mahut of Serampin. Between them are 6 grades. As prophecy is part of Nesach and Hod of Serampin, and dream is part of Hod of the nukhba. This is the Sephirah we're talking about in the beginning, right? Between them is Yesod of Serampin and Chesed Geurat Tiferet Nesach and Hod of the nukhba, which constitute 6 grades. A prophecy is in right and left, that is Nesach and Hod. A dream is in left, namely Hod. A dream emanates downwards a few grades to the angel Gabriel, from whom men receive the illumination of dreams. Therefore, dreams abide everywhere in the world, even outside Israel. Nevertheless, a man sees according to his grade, and according to the man, so is his grade. This means that it is not the same for every man, but prophecy does not emanate downward from Malchut of Atzilut, but shines where it is in the nukhba, the place of Serampin, which is the secret of the land of Israel, and the prophets that are inspired from it. Then further, in verse 50 of Vayetzeh, from the Sulam commentary of the Zohar, right? Come and behold, a dream comes from Gabriel, and a dream is 6 grades lower than a prophecy. This means that Gabriel receives the dream from Hod of the Nukhwa, which is the 6th grade from prophecy, and people receive it through Gabriel. And a vision is received from the grade of the living creature which rules by night. Because vision is the Nukhwa of Serampin and her actual place about which is said, and she rises also while it is yet night. From Proverbs, Mishlei, 31. It is therefore vision while awake and not a dream. You may contend that it is written, and said Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. Mahara. This is from Daniel 8. And therefore one could conclude that a vision is also received from Gabriel. He answers, assuredly this is so, but a vision is unclear, and a dream is more precise. Therefore a dream explains that which is not clear in the vision. Thus Gabriel, who is in charge of dreams, was chosen to explain the vague words of the vision. And now to conclude, let's read from Shabbat Kedusha, Part 4, Gate 1. The ways of activating and attaining the Ruach HaKodesh of divine inspiration are the following. In the 7th gate of the 3rd section, we already explained that there are 5 levels of attainment of the Holy Ruach HaKodesh, which are the Ruach HaKodesh itself, revelation of souls of the righteous, Tzaddikim, revelation of angels called Magidim, the revelation of the prophet Eliyahu, who is remembered for good, and dreams. So these are the 5 levels of attainment of the Ruach HaKodesh. So what we see here is basically that the Sharei HaKedusha is telling us that these 5 levels are considered levels of Ruach HaKodesh. And the first one is the highest one, which is the Holy Ruach HaKodesh itself in full extent. The second one, revelation of the souls of the Tzaddikim. We talked about this in previous lesson, about the words of the Tzaddikim. The words of the Tzaddikim, the revelations of angels called Magidim. Angels can come and basically teach you something, right? Reveal something and all that. And the revelation of the prophet Eliyahu is remembered for good, and so it talks about that, how Eliyahu can manifest and give clarity to verses of the Torah, verses of the Zohar, verses of books that we're reading, and also bring messages of pre-messianic nature. And then dreams. Dreams are like the 5th one, the one that is less clear. So dreams can be considered some kind of in some kind of level of Ruach HaKodesh. We're going to study this dream in a different lesson. So this is just, as we can see, comparing omens and dreams. But we're going to pay more attention to dreams in future lessons. It's just about dreams and all that, so people can understand that. And in the meantime, use this just an introduction and also a way to kindle your curiosity, so you can look also for more information about omens and dreams. And then when we are in that lesson, you can understand better what we're talking about or some of the sources that we are using and all that. If you have any questions about this lesson specific, make sure that you let us know in the comments below or through our website through the contact page, so we can answer as soon as we can. Now, our next lesson, we're going to discuss astrological fate setting and Masal insights through Torah. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing the 2 approaches, an approach that is very famous out there everywhere, which is they give you the horoscope, as they call it, and that daily horoscope is how your day is going to go according to the stars. when it comes to astrological faith setting, right? When it comes to Masal, insights through Torah, we're going to see that we're talking about gates, opening gates in creation, right? In time. And that these astrological signs that we see out there are just opportunities for us to do something, not for us to be influenced by them, but by using whatever influence these forces have, using these forces in order to for us to do something spiritual. Like every month has some kind of Jewish practical holiday, except Mar Cheshvan, of course. But even that month, it has nothing there. It's an opportunity for something. It's called bitter for a reason, right? So if it's bitter, uh, we need to sweeten it. How we do that? Charity, studying Torah, right? Things like that. So it's opportunities for us to do something. We enter the month of Kislev, and we have Hanukkah. What does the month means? What are the letters in the related to this month? The letters are created this month according to the Sefer Yetzirah, right? What are the 72 names of God related to this month? And how can I use this knowledge about this month in order for me to use those forces to transform myself? And also, we have Hanukkah. What does the meaning of this holiday um, mean to me, and how can I use this holiday to advance spiritually? So this is how we see astrology from a Kabbalistic point of view. We're also going to see in a more personal level, the application of astrology according to Kabbalah. But it's like telling a person that when the gates are going to be open for you to do certain things, but not that bad things are going to happen to you. You're going to have this marriage dissolution in the future because of this and that. That's not how we go. That's not how it's supposed to be. But we go by measuring time, by measuring or letting you know when the gate is going to open, when the gate is going to close. What is that opportunity that you have to do certain things so you can take action and all that? While in the other form, which is the form that we see there, all more famous, is they telling you today you're gonna find that you're gonna see a lot of people, and there's people that are married, and it's all that the horoscope is telling that you're gonna find the love of your life today. And it's like, but I'm married, and it's because very general. They're just saying things that people want to hear, and all that, and also in personal horoscopes telling people, well, you have these kind of like 80 years to live and all that. I heard that a lot. Not only the astrological signs that we use, we're talking about Vedantic astrology, astrology and Chinese astrology, or astrologers that actually use astrology to tell people, when things are going to happen, and instead of telling people when gates are going to open so you can do something about it, right? So we will see that in the next lesson. And like I said before, if you have any questions or anything like that, let us know, and we will answer it as soon as we can. We've been having some issues with the website, answering, but it's been fixed. And hopefully, I can answer questions some of you has submitted already. Thank you very much. Late trout, and we'll see you next time.